and welcome back to Anna Rose Reads. I am your host, Anna, and this is a very special episode. This is not an episode like I've done ever before. In fact, this is like a backlist deep dive, and thank God I have a good friend to join me for this because trying to gather my thoughts on The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, it's been quite a journey. I read the book for the first time last week. And as you all know, I probably have been blowing up social media about it, and I've had very many thoughts about this book. I went back and I watched the series, and my mind has not stopped whirling. So to join me today, I have a good friend that I've known for a very long time, and some may say the reason that I actually picked up this book when I did, my good friend Charlie, and you may know him as Bare Bones Books on Bookstagram and, social media. But Charlie, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining me on this journey.
Thank you, Anne. I mean, it has to be said, I did basically bully you into reading this book over the span of, several years at this
I
point,
think
right?
I think it's been 2 years because you sent me the full for like a birthday or Christmas. You sent the Folio Society of Hill House,
Yeah.
and then the following year you sent We Have Always Lived in the Castle.
Yeah, it's a problem, and I'm running out of Shirley Jackson special editions to send you. But yeah, I'll see what I can come up with for your birthday next year.
Well, they've been staring at me very ominously from my shelves for all this time. But it's all with good love because to be fair, you brought it up to me and you were like, given how much you like Rachel Harrison and like Catriona Ward, you have to read Shirley Jackson. I'm like, yeah, I know, I'm gonna get to it. And I kept putting it off. But you were like, no, like this is gonna be a real game changer for you. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And then I did read it, and then like I've been in shambles ever since, and you've been along for the ride. So, thank you for that.
No problem. I mean, look, I'm not much of a classics guy, but Shirley Jackson, I just kind of knew that you just got to get over the classic hump, and yeah, I just knew, like,
You were
she'll be in
you
your
were
mind, like,
you were very,
ever
very
after,
right.
really.
Yeah, no, living rent free, as the kids say these days. But
Absolutely.
anyway, so if people don't know you from the Bookstagram sphere, you also have like extra credit as to why I picked you to talk about this in particular.
Nepotism,
So
yeah.
not nepotism, but if you want to go ahead and talk about your relationship with Shirley Jackson, like academically speaking, I think that that's a really interesting place to start this conversation.
Gosh, well, I forget how many hours it is. There's that old adage of like, if you study something for like 10,000 hours, you become an expert at it. And
Yeah.
trust me, I'm not anywhere near that number for Shirley Jackson, but I'm pretty sure I could get to double that number and still have so many questions about her, this book, just everything about it. Um, yeah, so let me think. So I actually watched the show like before I even read the book, which was probably, yeah, kind of my opening point into Shirley Jackson. I'd watched Mike Flanagan before, for sure. So like I was kind of immediately kind of intrigued by the show. And yeah, it definitely just kind of blew me away. I mean, it's just not what I expected at all. I forget what year that was, maybe like 2020 or something.
Hmm.
Fast forward a bit. I read the book kind of way before even my master's.
Mm.
It was during COVID time, actually. And it's just always definitely fascinating. I just struggled with it a bit, I think. Like there was
Yeah.
definitely an intrigue with it.
Is
But
it one of those things that you felt like it had to like marinate in your brain for a while?
yeah, I always know I wanted to come back to it.
But you ended up writing a paper on this book in particular, correct?
Yes, yes. Yeah, it was like a 3-chapter dissertation. I had to do it for my master's. I kind of got to the point of my master's where I was like, I'm not really pushing myself. I'm getting the grade I want. I'm just going to write about whatever the hell I want. So I was
Yeah.
like, The Shining, Haunting of Hill House, and a mystery third book, which ended up being um, Last House on Neela Street.
Oh, hell yeah.
So
That's a golden trifecta. That is excellent.
yeah, it was kind of like chapter 1, just pure depression of The Shining. Chapter 2, even more depression of Haunting of Hill House. And then there's like a small glimmer of hope that like comes through at the end with Katrina Ward's book. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how many hours I kind of put into reading that book. I mean, I think this has probably been my fifth read at this point. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, the paper, generally speaking, it was about kind of trauma and how that intersects with haunted houses, and yeah, kind of how the haunted house will kind of open up them like festering wounds from the past and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, if you can find the paper, I would like to read it, but as we discussed before we started recording, it has fallen into the deep abyss of that mystery limbo time of, of
Yeah, my broken
COVID.
laptop.
Yeah, your broken laptop. Yeah. But I mean, and people can't see this. I'm holding up my copy of Hill House, and I still haven't finished tabbing it up all the way. But I've essentially read it almost all the way through twice this week because I read it for the first time, had my mind blown. I was like, I got to go back and I got to mark off all this crap and figure out. I had like a few questions that I wanted. I had some hypotheses, if you will. So then I started going back to like read and tab it, and yeah, I ended up reading it a lot closer than I thought that I would. I thought I was just gonna skim, and then I just kept catching things again and again, and I'm like, oh my God, it was right here this whole time. Um, but anyway, before we get too in the weeds with the book, for listeners, I mean, at this point, this is going to be a very spoilery episode, obviously. If you're like me and you still haven't read it, that's fine. Feel free to tag along and listen in. But like we will be going in depth on what happens in this book and the TV show as well. So that's going to be towards the end of the conversation. If you've only read the book and you want to skip out on the TV show, fret not. This first half will just be about the book. But just to summarize and set the scene from my and I think that this is the cool thing about Hill House. I think if I asked you to summarize this book and then I summarized it, it would be two completely different summaries. I think that this book means something different to every single person. You can argue about every kind of argument that you want to make about this book because there's like supporting evidence for everybody's theories. But to set the scene, basically there is this house called Hill House. And there is a doctor, Dr. Montague, who wants to go check it out and see if it's really spooky or not. He's like the original blueprint for Fox Mulder, if you ask me. Um, and he's like, how am I going to see if this place is really as weird as everybody says that it is? And so he sets out to find people who have like weird inclinations or weird brushes with the supernatural or paranormal. So he finds these two women, allegedly Eleanor Vance, and then a woman we only know as Theodora or Theo. We don't get a last name, which we'll revisit later. Um, and then part of the requirement of him having access to Hill House is that he has to have one of the family members who owns the house present. So then that inevitably ends up being the character that we know as Luke. He's got to be there as, part of the family that owns the house to oversee everything. They all show up at Hill House. Everybody has varying reactions to the location. They stay there for a few days. Weird shit starts happening. Uh, and depending on your read of the book, it's gonna determine the outcome. But to start off, we've kind of already gone over this, but Charlie, you said that your first brush with Shirley Jackson was also with the show, the Mike Flanagan show, and I had the same thing. So I watched the miniseries, the limited series, Hill House, back when it came out in 2018. Was absolutely obsessed with it. Like watched it multiple times. It affected me deeply, and yeah, it still didn't like suck me fully into horror, and that's really quite a shame. But like, it definitely piqued my interest. And then I don't, and we can talk about this a little bit. I don't know why, but I was always very intimidated by the book. I don't know. For some reason I thought it was set way later than it was, as far as like setting and time period goes, and I just felt like it was going to be too dense for me. But then upon reading it, I was like, oh, this is super accessible. And I had a lot of fun with it on the first read. Like, did you have that same experience? Or like, I thought it was really funny. Like, there's a lot of humor in that book.
It's definitely funny. I mean, I think any section involving Mrs. Dudley, I mean, the comic relief is much needed. Same with Arthur and Mrs.
Oh my
Montague.
God.
I think those characters definitely serve a purpose, in terms of, yeah, giving you a break, if anything.
Yeah, no, for real. Um, but like I just don't I think that I was expecting it to be this like and I think it is in part, we can talk about that iconic opening paragraph, right? Like the whatever walks there walks alone. Um, it's so beautifully written on Shirley Jackson's part that I think I assumed that the whole entire book was going to be like just dripping with that same level of I don't even know what word you want to use to describe it. But and like as good as it is, I do think it makes like for denser reading if the whole thing would have been written that way. But I think that she does a good job of kind of like pacing it out to where it's like very accessible, but then like you read one line, you're just like blown away with what she's saying.
Yeah, I mean, that opening paragraph, I mean, it sets the bar at a level where, I mean, I don't think it could possibly continue for the whole thing.
No, no, it's a good
It's
point.
truly,
There is like a passage I think whenever I think it's whenever Dr. Montague is giving this spiel about the house's history. Or like maybe the wrongness of the house, like because they go into the man who built it, Hugh Crane, how he like built it with wrongness. Every angle is just like a slight bit off, like every, whatever. It's meant to like mess with your head.
mm,
And there was a passage I think in there that like really stuck with me too. But no, I agree. It's a hard level to sustain the full way out. So I think what I want to open up with as far as like this really deep discussion goes is the idea of like intellect versus reality, right? And like the otherworldly as well. Because right off the bat, the premise of this book is Dr. Montague wanting to find out if what everybody says about Hill House is real. And like, isn't that the basis of like all horror that we know now in some ways? Like, or I don't want to say all of it. I think that we're kind of moving past it in a way. But I feel like a big crux of the horror genre is like how much of this is really real and how much danger does it present to everybody else?
I think the medium is like quite important with this, where with words, like it's even more deceptively difficult to figure out what's real and what isn't, to kind of,
Yeah.
flip the show quickly. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking of the Bent Neck Lady episode, of course, where it's, flitting between, an imaginary scene where it's idealistic and then, it's, very jarring with, the reality of Hill House in its kind of despondent state.
Yeah.
Um, and, that's effective in its own right, kind of the differences and the contrast between the two. With words, I think, everything gets kind of mushed together a bit and it's really up to you to try and figure out where the line is between real and not. And I think, that's definitely something in the book that, yeah, that's why it's so rereadable for me. I think, you really do take something different from it, like each
Yeah.
time around.
Yeah, no kidding. And like it just feels it's so muddled. And like, I really thought I was like really so smart and about this because I was like, I think that, and to, be specific, it's really Eleanor who gets singled out, it feels like, by the house, as made evidence through like events that happen, like all the writing on the wall is indicated towards her. Um, she and like she's like really our main character. She's the lens through which we're viewing all this. So, I thought, we meet her as Eleanor, but as the book advances, everybody starts calling her Nell or Nellie. And I felt like in particular when that name switch happens, that's when like her grip on reality really seems to falter. And in particular, I think the first time that I clocked the name change from Eleanor to Nellie was after like the first quote unquote scare of the night.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
it's after the wall banging that her and Theo experience in their room or their rooms, collectively because they have an adjoining bathroom. The architecture of the house is really important, I think, in this too. So like that's why I say like their space collectively. Um, but after that initial scare, they start calling her Nellie or Nell, and there's like a level of familiarity with that is supposed to be comforting, right? But like it also indicates closeness, yet as the story progresses, everybody's really kind and ambivalent towards Nell, and then all of a sudden there's like this huge tonal shift. everybody starts kind of being weird to her, and then that's whenever it feels like there's this unreality. Like it's so like I don't know about you, but I felt so it was so jarring and like whiplash like and like kind of gaslighty that like Theo and Luke and the Dr. Montague for the most part is always like pretty nice towards Eleanor, but they get to be kind of mean to her and it wounds me so deeply. Did you like clock that same shift?
I think that's always the aspect that confuses me. Like on every reread, it feels like everyone's being so nice. Eleanor starts to kind of slowly lose grip on reality, and then suddenly everyone's being really mean to her. And yeah, it's really hard to track. I think on this reread, because I was thinking a lot of kind of the illusions that Hill House kind of plays, right?
Yeah.
Um, like they keep mentioning the brook essentially, like in the garden outside, and the goldfish and stuff. And
Yeah.
on this read, I was quite happy to kind of think, yeah, that's not real. That's just an illusion that Hill House will play. And maybe this is just me trying to cope with them being really mean to poor Nell. But on this reread, I'm starting to hope that maybe these horrible remarks that Theo and Luke and whatnot would come up with, maybe that was kind of an illusion as well. That's
Yeah.
really what I'm kind of hoping for this reread. I don't know.
No, I agree because like, for the most part, when we meet Theo with Eleanor, there's a queer lens to view this where you're like, oh, there's chemistry there. Like on my first read, I was like, oh my God, are they gonna kiss? Like I was like, please let them kiss. But then like upon the second read, I think knowing how kind of ugly Theo can turn towards her really kind of
Yeah.
soured my perception of that, and I didn't feel as strongly about that on my second read. Um, I think that well, let's do this. Let's go ahead. I'm gonna let you throw out your theory of like what big grand scheme you think is going on at Hill House and what you think you take away like what's the big picture that you take away with this book and like what it means to you, and then I'll share mine and we can kind of like go back and forth on that because I think in order to like talk about the specifics we got to talk about the big stuff first. That feels like a
Okay.
natural place to start.
Sure. Well, it's such a hard novel to pin down, but I think the one thing I always kind of rely on is that to me it's a tragedy, like in every
Oh
sense.
yeah. Yeah.
And Eleanor is absolutely the tragic character, who's like everything about her downfall feels inevitable to me.
Yeah.
Especially I mean the journey's end in lovers meeting, saying that's just repeated over and over again.
Yeah,
Like,
I would love to know what like that it still kind of troubles me because even on a second read I'm like who are the lovers that are meeting? Is it because Eleanor feels like she's found love and acceptance with found family and this is it for her because she's had a life that's been very sheltered and secluded? Is it that Theo and because there's an undertone of like Theo and Luke maybe being an item. I think I read on this read because there's the whole bit where after one of the nights that they have like a scare, they Theo's like, "Oh, you have my sock" or something like that. And he makes a comment like,
yeah,
"Oh, well, I'm entitled to take what, whatever." And so like is it like them meeting and so then that's it for Eleanor? Like she doesn't feel like she's compatible with anybody, so she feels lonely and then that's the end of it for her? Is it that the door has been opened in terms of like queerness and she feels like she maybe can't find love with a woman because she's intrigued by Theo and like that, like there's so many readings of that Journey's End and Lovers Meeting that I would love to know what exactly it means, although it can mean so many different things depending on who it is that's reading it.
yeah. I think for me, and that this is like the tragic reading coming through again. I think it's Eleanor in the Hill House. Like that is the lovers' meeting. It's
Yeah.
Eleanor come home. Unfortunately, this is she was meant to be with Hill House. I think that's kind of my main reading for it, and it's
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. It's super important. It makes my stomach hurt when I think about it too
Yeah,
long. And you know, we talked about this whenever I first read the book. You know, I am forever plagued by my Catholic upbringing. And so at first when I read it, it felt I was dead set on Hill House being like purgatory. Like
Mm.
Hill House is purgatory.
I love
Eleanor
that as well.
Yeah, Eleanor enters Hill House on the heels of her mother's death, and she was caring for her mother with her sister for a very long time, but there's like bad blood with the sister. They don't get along. Um, and she like Eleanor says like she it feels like whenever we meet her, she's kind of like in this weird limbo, and like Hill House feels like the limbo. It feels like a liminal space. You know, when they try and navigate the house, they can't find where they're going, much like purgatory. You know, they're stuck there essentially to fulfill the wishes of Dr. Montague. And like plus there's also the thing of like Eleanor mentions how many chances she gets to leave and she doesn't. And it's almost like a level of like toughness, like, oh, I'm not, and like also stability, like, oh, I'm not crazy. Oh, I'm not afraid. I am afraid. And so she keeps staying. It's such an interesting mental battle that she has with like what she is and what she isn't. And that feels so indicative of like a greater wrestling with who she is and then like thus her morality because it comes out later that she you know, it's hard to know because she's not a reliable narrator. We find out that she's been lying at the end of the book about so many things. And so she's also like, yeah, I mean, like my mom was knocking on the wall for help and I didn't get up and go help her. I kept sleeping or whatever. So it like in essence did she kill her mom? Did, you know, like where's the culpability in that? And then like again, if she's, you know, being presented a perfect playground in Hill House for like the things, in particularly with Catholicism. I'm not saying that this is how I feel about it, but through the Catholic lens, you know, like queerness is frowned upon, right? So she's presented Theo, this vibrant woman who is very assured in who she is. And like whether it feels like Theo is the temptation by which Eleanor has to indicate whether or not she's morally sound by Catholic standard. This is so deep and so like in the weeds with Catholicism. But like I feel like it also gave me a reason for why Theo switches up on her in terms of kindness versus like this cold shoulder abandonment, right? Like it's all up until Nellie is like, "Yes, I will go home with you. Yes, I will go stay with you." That Theo is like, "Oh no, you can't come home with me." That's like Eleanor's version of hell. Like she's re-entering
Mm.
this isolation that she so long sought to escape. And so it feels like Hill House is the determiner of morality for Eleanor in so many ways. And it all feels very psychological and, you know, somewhat spiritual in that way. And then the other reason that I viewed it like through this like religious lens is that we have Hugh Crane is in the house like he has this marble statue in the house that is like so disturbing to read about. I don't know why it freaked me out so bad. So he's like there and like if you view it, it's like the watchful eye, you know, and like in Catholicism we have these crucifixes everywhere, like Jesus is always watching. It feels very much like that. And then lo and behold, towards the end of the book, they allegedly find this like scrapbook kind of like Ten Commandment thing that he put together for his children that is absolutely grotesque. And I'm like, again, the turning point, like the thing that felt so revolting with that is like this father's guiding hand that's like so demented. It just feels very, very organized religion coded, specifically with Catholicism and that. And so that was the lens at which I first read it. On another read, it feels much more like psychological and intellectual. But yeah, that was like my knee-jerk reaction first go around.
I think, I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? You can read it so many times, get something new from it. Um, do you find Hugh Crane just really interesting? Because to me,
I
Hill
know.
House is very much kind of a character in of, you know, itself. And so
Yeah.
the idea of like Hugh Crane kind of like I just struggle to believe that anyone has control over that house. Like I feel like even he's probably, you know, lower on the like hierarchy than the house.
Yeah. Well, it would I would be so curious to know like and again, this is getting really in the weeds with it and like taking it very literally, like how much influence the house had on him when he
Mm,
built it. Because, you
yes.
know, there's like a certain passage, I think it's what like the Dr. Montague says, like with the builders, like the house like constructing, like it's not like the house just constructed itself. Like there were people who made it. But like under what influence, right? Like if they're all under this very strange influence of like liminal space and like off-kilterness. I mean, there's a scene whenever Nellie is trying to like look up at the tower and she damn near falls over because she's got like this vertigo sense and Luke catches her. Um, it's all just so disorienting. I don't like I think that this book is like if you could have a tactile thing that like this is disorientation, it is The Haunting of Hill House, you know?
Yeah, it feels very, and I've just thought about this, it feels very Frankenstein's monster, where,
Oh
how
yeah.
they're creating every room kind of, one point of an angle, away from 90 degrees, everything's slightly off. It
Yeah.
feels very uncanny in that regard. And yeah, I just wonder if they've created a monster without even meaning to. Like, it feels very like, you try and create a house in, his image, I assume, and then it just becomes
Yeah.
something, way more monstrous than you'd ever think. It becomes, its own thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like the other thing that that brings me to is like the definition of like house versus home. And this like
Mm,
really comes up with the TV series, I think, and we can get into that later. But
yes.
in particular with the book, one of the things that starts with the descent, I think, of Eleanor's mental well-being is there's these messages that appear on the wall. It says, "Come home, Eleanor." And it's not, the way that she talks about her life prior to entering Hill House is not one of a home. She talks about how she cared for her mother and like how awful that was. And then like whenever she's leaving from to go to Hill House with her sister, they're arguing over the car. And then like, when she's reporting to Theo, and again, we don't really know what's real and what's not because she lies. Like about her apartment and how she's like still building it out piece by piece and she wants it to be just right, but it's still not done. Like what is home to Eleanor? And then like, we see eventually as the book progresses that she feels like Hill House is home. But it's such a weird subversion of expectations because the house is saying come home and she's already there, if that makes sense. So where is
Yeah.
home for Eleanor? Like what even is home, you know?
I think she's just so in need of connection because
Yeah.
at the very beginning when, she enters the house and once she's met everyone, like there's such like an exuberance with her. She's like, I'm home, like these are my people. And that
Yeah.
slowly transitions into, the house is me, I own the house. But it just feels like, yeah, she just needs a like personal connection that she just didn't have with her mum. And,
Yeah.
there's no mention of past relationships or anything. She just feels like a very, like, unfortunately, like, lonely being who, just really needs that personal connection to kind of feel that belonging that you would get in a home.
Yeah. And it's like I keep saying damn you Shirley Jackson this week, but like she sets it up so well to like break your heart with Nellie because when I said I had fun reading this, it's because, like after the first night that they experience something scary, there's like a giddiness the following morning
Mm,
that like they're
that's
even
so interesting.
interrogating like why are we not more freaked out? Why are we excited? Like there's like this whole thing of them being excited because I think that it's like the house brought them closer together and then rips them apart. And that is so upsetting. Like, oh my God, it's so upsetting, you know?
And it's so insidious as well. I mean, one thing I'm still trying to get my head around is, at the beginning, Dr. Montague is very much like, if I think you're in danger, like, you've got to leave. And
Yeah,
I'm reading it and I'm thinking, like, Ellen is like, there's something wrong here. Like, you're
yeah.
acknowledging it. Like, why is she still here? Like, why does it take, her nearly dying to send her away when, up to that point, it's very clear that there's something wrong.
Yeah, the one thing about Eleanor that I really appreciate though that she's not dumb because there's
Oh
a
no.
scene there's a scene whenever she's like I think it's whenever Theo's clothes get the blood all over them. She's like pretty level-headed and like Dr. Montague is like, I actually appreciate you like keeping your head with this one while we deal with it. And like internally we read like am I doing like the what is my reaction? Am I afraid? Am I not afraid? That whole thing. but like outwardly presenting, she's like kind of got her grip. And then like that's whenever she starts to like detest Theo, which is
Mm.
such a straight like I would love like that moment. I just would love to hold it underneath the microscope because like Theo's losing her shit, basically crashing out full on. And Eleanor is like trying to comfort her, and she even says like whenever she has to touch Theo, she's like, I wonder what it's like to see her dead. Like she is so disgusted by her and her like frenzied state. She like wants her dead. To whereas before she talks about how lovely Theo is and like all it's so interesting the tonal shift between the characters, you know?
Yeah, those thoughts feel just very intrusive to me. Like it's like, yeah, I'd like to see her like hit to death with rocks, and it's like, whoa, where did this come from? A page ago you were,
Yeah.
just being so nice. It was very friendly.
Well, like the crazy thing too about that line is like if you think about back whenever we meet Eleanor, her background, the reason that she gets picked is because allegedly there were stones falling on her house between her and her sister when they were arguing. That's why Dr. Montague picks her out is because there's this like record of it raining stones on their house. And so there's just again, that's also a biblical thing, stoning. Um,
Mm.
but like the callback to that is insane on Shirley Jackson's part. But what it means in terms of like her view of everybody else, these interpersonal relationships, and like even her view of herself, and like whether she's sane or not is so slippery. Like it's
Yeah,
so hard to hold on to.
it's impossible to really kind of pinpoint, what's her, what's the house, because those moments I really want to believe that's not her because it doesn't line up with the Eleanor we've seen
Yeah,
up to that point, and we don't really see that kind of aggressive, mind process again after that. I think her, if you use the word possession, like the house, like
yeah,
possessing her, like it becomes very kind of it's very dreamy in terms of
yeah.
and slippery in terms of her thoughts, but it's not like I'm going to kill everyone, but that
Yeah.
feels very isolated to that moment, which I think definitely makes it stand out.
Well, what I think is so crazy is that, this is a deeply disturbing book and there is no violence.
No,
Um,
no.
there's not an ounce of violence in this book. I mean, you can say that Eleanor's ending is a bit violent, but it's not done unto her other than anybody than herself. And they even confront that in the very beginning of the book. When Dr. Montague is like talking about hauntings, it's like, oh, you never actually have to worry about the house doing anything to you. It's always yourself that you have to worry about. And again, that's like the brilliance of like on a reread, you're like, wow, it was right there in front of us all along. Um, but yeah, like I think it's a really harrowing thing to sit with that like we are truly our own worst enemy sometimes, right? Like
Mm.
being that in your head and like the thought that there is a place that capitalizes on that so much and tears you apart, systematically like that leaves you in a place like Eleanor to where you're literally driving an automobile into a tree. That's like the only out that you see for yourself. Like that's so harrowing and like sad to think about too because, you know, I mean, I grew up rather sheltered and through no fault of my parents, I did it to myself. I was one of those kids who was like, no, I have to take very literally what I learned in school, my Catholic school, and I cannot, fall into sin and all that bullshit. And so like I really like I hate to say it, but I really relate to Eleanor because she's so sheltered. And it's like, oh my girl, you just finally got a taste of an independent life. Even though it's at Hill House, you see what it's like to find people on your own and like she has this weird connection with her. Like I didn't pick it up on the first read, but on the second read, there's so many sections she's like, well, my mom would, and she keeps doing this callback to my mom would say, my mom would do, my mom. So she's obviously got some trauma related to her mother. You can tell like she's trying to escape it, obviously, because this is her first venture away from all this. And then for this to be such an open and enlightening experience, and like for her to find joy in Hill House, for it to be the thing that ends her, ugh, like it gives me a stomach ache thinking about it for too long.
Yeah, I mean the mystery of a mother, right? I think she like knew she was dying and kind of slept through it because she does speak about um yeah, kind of like she thinks she hears her mum's
Yeah,
kind of
the
screaming, but
knocking.
she's
Yeah.
she's asleep. But then I just finished the book like half an hour ago. There's a bit where she talks about being a really light sleeper, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. And I think there's definitely, like to me, a lot of kind of guilt beneath the surface of that as well, right? And
Yeah.
I think Hill House just feels like the place where you can't hide your
Yeah.
feelings. Like this is where it comes out, and yeah,
Oh,
it's
that's a good
downhill.
point. Yeah, and like even her saying like, and this is not an original thought that I had. Johnny Compton pointed this out on Talking Scared whenever they did their Hill House deep dive. Like for her to know that her mom was knocking, but then to say, "Oh, I slept through it," like obviously not. You were awake
Mm.
if you heard the knocking. So she kind of tells on herself with that. But I don't know. Like I have a hard time imagining Eleanor as a nefarious person. And I think I almost rival a bit with as much of like the sanity insanity angle of Hill House of like, is she really guilty? Like, or was she just pushed to her limit? It's all very Carrie. Like, I feel like this book and Carrie are like very much like it had to be that, and I don't know that Stephen King has ever acknowledged it. I'm not a Stephen King scholar. You would probably know more than me on this, but like the connective tissue between Eleanor and Carrie just feels super rich, in my opinion.
I know. I say I know. I feel like I've read it somewhere, at least with with the rocks falling on the house. I mean, that feels
Yeah.
like an obvious connection for sure. And yeah, I mean, you don't have to read many Stephen King books to come across the name Shirley Jackson.
Yeah, no, good
That's
point.
for
I mean,
sure.
and like you wrote in your paper with The Shining, I mean, how informed is that on, like this having a place that's so malevolent that just kind of heightens your existing predilections or instabilities or, you're haunted by the things that you have or haven't done, and then there's just this place that's like the veil is a little bit thinner and you can't miss it and it's gonna haunt you that way.
Yeah, your vulnerabilities are going to show. I mean, you get that in the Overlook, of course, with Jack's alcoholism, um, his like
Yeah.
domestic abuse, all of that. It comes to the fore when he's trying to kind of ignore it, forget about it, move on, like whatever it is. Like there's no hiding from it there.
Yeah,
And
that's
like
very
very
true.
similar with Hill House, even with like the different context, right?
Yeah.
Well,
There's
whatever you're trying to hide away, it comes out.
yeah, no, for real. And like the whole entire thing of like Eleanor fessing up at the end to being like, actually, I don't have anything and I don't have anywhere to go. I don't
Oh,
have,
it's so
whatever. It just is so upsetting. But there's another point that I want to talk about that I didn't catch on the first read, but I caught on the second read. Is there's two things that Shirley Jackson does a lot of, and it's the use of color versus grayscale
mm,
and the sensation of cold. Like there's the obvious cold spot in the house, but like the characters report feeling cold in times, like or at least Eleanor anyway. She reports like feeling very, very cold whenever things are seemingly going awry. And then same thing, like she's wearing this like vibrant red shirt when we meet her. But then when they walk in the woods, like they talk about things turning to grayscale. That, whenever something is imminent, we don't even really know what it is. And then like I think also the fact that Theo is like, in a place as drab as this, it's our duty to be a shining light or something like that. And then additionally, whenever Theo's clothes get ruined, she ends up wearing Eleanor's red sweater. I think that there's so much to that. I don't know what it is, and I would probably need a third read to unpack that. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on those, but I feel like there's something there.
I think it's just a really clever use of the senses where
Yeah.
she's clearly set out to write the book, and she's going in terms of visual scares. Like we're not doing violence, we're not doing monsters. Essentially, it's very Lovecraftian in the sense of like it's there's something there, but I'm not telling you what it is.
Yeah.
And to kind of have that contrast between hot and cold, you know, whenever that occurs, and grey, vibrant. That's something that we can immediately kind of visualize, like feel. Like it feels like a great way to kind of put us in the book if
Yeah.
she's not going to use something jumping out of the closet.
Yeah, I think it's just so smart though because like you talk or at least for me, I know whenever I'm truly frightened or like I've experienced anxiety episodes in the past, I faint. So like the actual physiological thing of fainting is like everybody's like, oh, you're as white as a ghost, and you drain of color, and then you're gone, like you knock out. Like that is so emblematic of what happens in this book. For Eleanor, like she just gets to this point where she's just drained of color and she can't see a way out, and then that's it for her. It's so upsetting. I love it because it's so poetic, and I think
Yeah,
it
yeah.
speaks so much to like the human condition, but you just feel for Eleanor, especially as like within if you take it within the context of like this came out in 59 for a woman in particular. Like God, it's so upsetting. It's just so you just want so much better for her.
You need to read into Shirley Jackson's biography if you haven't already, and then you're gonna have so much more.
Oh shit.
um,
All right. Well, I ordered
I
I
don't know it well
ordered
enough to kind of explain it here, but yeah, definitely do that. I think Life of the Savages, she's written like a non-fiction book, which is like her domestic life and like the struggles
yeah.
of it, and I think all of that definitely plays into you know like the character of Eleanor, and probably like you're reading We Always Lived in the Castle as well, like all of that.
Yeah. I mean I ordered a bunch of her other stuff after finishing this off of thrift books, so that'll be in shortly. But I am reading We Have Always Lived in the Castle now. I think I'm like 60% in, and I I love how weird this book is. It is so weird. It's so
It's
fucking
so
weird.
good.
It's so
Well, we could go
strange.
dangerously off track here, but yeah, that book,
We could.
memorable.
But there's two ties though. There's like a few things that are callbacks, and actually this is a good segue. There's much in the limited series, the Mike Flanagan series, that also feels like it's coming from We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Like there's a couple
Mm.
things that
It's
I'm
very
like,
Flanagan, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. But before we get too off track with We Have Always Lived in the Castle, let's talk about the series because I feel like it's controversial. There are people that you and I who absolutely love and adore it, and then there are the as you have told me, the Shirley Jackson purists who are not so much of fans of what he decided to do with it. Um, I don't know. I think that we have a unique perspective because we both watched the series first before we read the book, you know?
Yeah, I think the order is so important. Like even with
Yeah.
any adaptation, right? Um,
Yeah.
like The
I
Shining
don't
again, I use for an example. Don't really like the film just because it's so different from the book. I appreciate it's doing its own separate thing, but
yeah.
I've always kind of wondered, like, if I watched the film first and then read the book, I probably appreciate the film a lot more.
Well, like there's this weird thing that I think that happens with Hill House and the adaptation that is like the inverse of what happened with The Shining. The
Mm.
Shining of what in my opinion, of what Stephen King wrote is very grounded for the most part. Like there is a thread of reality that runs through it. And this I have not read The Shining since 2014. So like over 11 years ago. If I botch this, like correct me here if I'm wrong. But it felt a lot more grounded in reality than I had anticipated it to, honestly, whenever I went into reading it. Um, and the struggles are very human with Jack and his violence and his temper and all of that felt much more real than I expected it to. But then you watch the film and I mean, visually it's stunning, right? And
For sure.
it's one of those films that I watched it for the first time and I was like, there is something wrong. There is something embedded in this movie that is inherently wrong, that is woven into its DNA, because it just feels off and it is just so over the top demented with watching Shelley Duvall cower in a corner and scream her head off. Jack Nicholson's just like beating down the door and poor little Dan, like there's a lot of vibrancy in that movie that like scares the shit out of you. But conversely, I would say Hill House the book is much more art house and like I don't want to say whimsical, but like dreamlike, like you said, compared to the series that what Mike did. It's very grounded in things that we know. It's a family drama. It's working through grief. I mean, he works through the stages of grief. It's addiction. It's all of these things that we all know intimately very well. So, and I in a way, I think that Mike even made it a little bit more accessible than Shirley did in the book sometimes. because I think if you're not, like, I think of my mom because she's, a very literal person and like what she would be into. And I actually got her to watch parts of the Hill House series with me, but I don't think I could ever get her to read the book because it would just be too symbolic, I think, for her to get full enjoyment out of it because she's so linear
Sure.
thinking. But I think like Mike did a good job of finding a way to take what Shirley started, change it up a little bit, but put it in a way that like a larger audience. I mean, it's kind of like going commercial and selling out, like right, like with being punk, depending on how you view it. But I don't know. It's different, but I appreciate it.
It's interesting. It feels, and I know this isn't quite accurate, but it feels like rewatching Flanagan's Hill House at the minute. It feels like it kind of starts at the end of the book in like a weird way.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I don't know. There's someone. It's so weird because I just started rewatching the series as well to like
Mm.
find the threads that he decided to pull upon and
Yeah,
like
yeah,
implement. Because like even something as small as like Nell, whenever she passes in the series, she's buried and wears in her coffin a red shirt, and that felt like a callback to Eleanor's red shirt that Theo ends up wearing in the book. It's the small
yeah.
stuff
So
like
many
that that
Easter
I'm
eggs. Yeah,
yeah, it's the small stuff like that that I'm so curious like how he landed on using, you know?
yeah. It's really hard to kind of. I'm finding it really hard to kind of pull the threads from the show and find them in the book, which is maybe why like stunt fans of the book maybe struggle a bit with the series where like they are separate entities for sure. I think like the most obvious one to me is kind of found family in the book versus obviously your real family drama in the show, and kind of like the differences and similarities between those.
The idea of like found family versus real family, I think it's almost I can't tell which is worse. Whenever you think that you found your people like by choice, in the
Mm.
in the instance of Hill House the book, where Eleanor feels like she's at home with these people by choice, like she's found them, random. I don't want to say random, but it is kind of random. Compared to like your real family in the limited series for Mike Flanagan, like all of the there's not the same characters, but like Nell, Theo, everybody else as siblings, that you don't get a choice. That is your family. And that feels like two very different connotations because we see as the series unfolds, like there's even okay, so like there's the oldest brother Steve, his decisions and like what he does with Hill House, which by the way, on this rewatch, I detest Steve way more than I did on
Look, Steve. Yeah,
on
just putting that
previous
out there.
watches. Um, there's Shirley, the oldest daughter, who like very much takes on the responsibility of the family. It feels like she's trying to keep it all together because Steve's being an ass. And like she takes on too much to the point where she's like kind of poisoning herself, it feels like, because she's so angry. There's Theo, the middle child, my favorite one, who like has this like supernatural ability to like whenever she touches things, she feels everything. I love that character so much. And I mean, the actress Kate Siegel who brings her life does an incredible job. But beyond that, then there's also the twins, Nell and Luke, and they are both just so tragic for different reasons, but they're all bound together by blood and deed. Like they are bound together because they are family. They don't really have a choice, and it's interesting to see how they interact with one another and what they decide to do for one another and who steps up and who stays away and who, falls to the back and all those different things in the face of all these different, challenges that that family faces over however many years, compared to the book where it's just these people who've just met each other and are somewhat trauma bonded by the scares at Hill House, It's such an interesting choice to make on Flanagan's part to kind of have that connection be instituted, if that makes sense.
Yeah, trauma bond is a good word actually, because I was thinking in the show with the adults, I mean, they're all kind of bonded by grief, right? Whether it's their mother or poor Nell in the end, like grief kind of is perpetually there in like every conversation, kind of
Yeah.
every dynamic between them, right? And then obviously in the book, there's a trauma bond. It's definitely not grief. It's kind of, I don't know. There's a mystery, isn't there?
I think it's
Like
like,
they
is
need
it,
each other.
yeah, but isn't it like fear in the book that what is what binds them
Absolutely, yeah.
together? And in a way, that's true to the show, but more so, it feels like grief, you know?
Mm.
So, I think that I think what Flanagan does as well with, we were talking about this when we both watched the Bit Neck Lady episode, that being like just a fucking masterpiece one, we have to say. Super upsetting. Cried multiple times watching it again, even though you know it's gonna happen. It almost makes it both Hill House the book and Hill House the series are more upsetting on a rewatch or reread whenever you know it's gonna happen. Like
Yeah,
100%.
yeah,
They're pieces of art that uh are 100% more effective, I think, on a second viewing or reading. But, for Nell, the fact that TV series Nell, as a child, is haunted by her adult hanged dead body. It like
it's
you want to talk about
awful.
it's terrible. But you want to talk about Mike Flanagan understanding the tragic nature of the character of Nell from the book. I mean, and we talked about this too, previously. There's a weird parallel between the book and the show that I think is super interesting, and Mike Flanagan, if you ever listen to this, I want to have a conversation. Um, in the book, whenever Nell makes the decision to drive her car into the tree at the end, because she doesn't want to leave Hill House. She's like, I will stay at Hill House forever. Everybody else makes me want to leave, blah, blah, blah. Um, she seems very like manic and set in her ways. But before she hits the tree, there is a moment of horrific clarity where she says, why aren't they stopping me? Referring to everybody else. Why did they let me do this? And then Mike Flanagan does the same fucking thing in the series. Whenever Nell is in the house, she's hallucinating seeing her mom and the necklace is slipped around her neck, but it's the noose. But then she has the moment of clarity that she realizes that it's the noose and she turns around and she says, Mommy, like, why are, she doesn't say it, but it's heavily implied through her countenance, like, why are you doing this to me? Why aren't you pulling me back? And that's so, obviously upsetting, but like so telling, of what both Eleanors, book Eleanor and series Eleanor, really want. Like, I don't think that either one of them is actually suicidal. I think that they just want love, you know?
Yeah, I mean, next time someone says that Mike Flanagan is not mean enough, I'm just going to point them to those final 5 minutes, I think, because, oh my God, it's so rough. I mean, and it's so beautiful before that as well with the dancing
Yeah.
and kind of like the idealized Hill House, but you just know it's tainted with what's coming next because, you already know she's dead. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
And yeah, like if anyone deserved a happy ending, it's poor now. And the fact that, she essentially realizes in her final moments that she's, essentially seeing her like future dead body throughout her life. No, it's awful.
Well, and in the series too, they talk about, whenever she goes and she confronts Steven at his book event, about, she thinks like she's making progress with this therapist and she stops taking her meds and all this stuff. She goes and she confronts him about his book and kind of like airing their dirty laundry in the book and all the things that he says about the family in the book. Um, she feels or he makes a comment to her that's like, we've been here through all your phases. We've been here through the Christianity phase, the New Age phase, the this phase. And so like to me, what that tells me is Nell is such a lost soul in the series who is trying to find the answers or some fucking relief to this feeling that she's had all of her life of unease or unsettledness, and she doesn't know what the answer is. And there has to be something that, is said for the people who, rather than wallowing in their discomfort or their, upsetness or whatever, who go out and try and fix it. right? Like they always say like that's half the battle is like knowing you have a problem. And like
Yeah.
it's that it makes it even more tragic that you know that Nell has fought tooth and nail, tried all these different things to find some comfort, and then in the end it's Hill House and then that's the thing that kills her, right?
Yeah, she's done everything right. I mean, the doctor slightly misguided has said, you need to confront your past, which,
Yeah.
I feel like in most, fiction, real life, that's the tough thing you have to do, but that is how you move on from stuff, right? Not in this show. No,
No.
no. That's what kills her in the end. You know, unpacking that trauma and, actually going back, witnessing a childhood, that's her demise.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it's just so
so
subversive, so
yeah. Well, and
yeah.
it feels like too, this is like another like little thread that I feel like Mike picked up on is like, I talked about how unnerved I was about like the Granite family statue that's in Book Hill House, but then in Series Hill House, the whole entire house is filled with these marble statues. And then like in particular, there's
Mm,
like this atrium behind the grand staircase that has like all these marble statues. And like that's where we like see Nell, hauntedly dance through this empty, decaying house before she ultimately hangs herself. Um, it's so beautiful and gorgeous that it's one of those like haunting, arresting things that you view. And then like because I saw the series first when I read the book, I'm like, oh my God, like how did Mike translate from the book that one mention of this imposing figurine, this marble statue? And to be fair, Shirley Jackson, when she writes the book, she gives Theo has like a line that's like, "Oh, when you reach out and touch marble that looks like that, you expect to feel flesh." Like that's how real life it looks. And I feel like that
ugh.
one sentence just gave Mike so much to run with. And I would love to know how that came to be for him, if that makes sense. Like how that grew
Yeah.
legs.
I mean, this is a great show for whenever there's a scene set at Hill House, you're watching in the background for, something to move.
Oh yeah.
There's one scene where there are like bags like hung up on the wall and it looks like a face. I'm like, how the hell did you manage that? Like that looks like a face like attached to the wall.
Well, I know that they definitely did like the hidden ghost thing. Like when you
Yeah.
watch, you can see them move in and out and stuff, which makes it, it's very fun on that part makes it fun. Everything else is pretty I think that the only piece of comic relief that I've had so far in this rewatch is whenever Shirley punches Theo in the boob and then she's like, "Did you just punch me in the boob?" And like that was the only time that I've laughed in all of this. This has been very much more of a like sad, emotional rewatch for me. Um but yeah, man, I don't know. There's so much that you can pull, and I think it also speaks to the testament of what Hill House means to everybody. And it's almost like I would want to like run a poll or like do various interviews where I talk to people and I'm like, what do you think happened at Hill House in the book? And like, what does it mean to you? Because obviously it looks very different to all of us.
New series idea for you right there.
Okay. I don't know if people want to hear that much about Hill House. But no, I don't know. It's so I didn't expect to be as affected as I was by the book. Obviously, you hear it referenced time and time again, like, oh, in current works, like this obviously has been impacted by Shirley Jackson. I mean, like when we talk about Catriona Ward, which is fairly frequently, we talk
Mm,
about how
yeah.
she encapsulates the same style or feelings that Shirley Jackson does. And so I think in my head, I thought that as a whole, visiting Hill House in the book after seeing the series and reading horror fiction the way that I have, that it was going to be more of like an atmosphere style thing that we were going to have talked about being emulated. But it's so much more than that. It is so deeply ingrained in like a psychological character study way that's deeply upsetting.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we've read a lot of horror fiction up to this point, right? We've read a
Yeah.
lot of haunted houses. I mean, it takes something quite new, fresh, like Play Nice, for example, to, really kind of get your teeth into it and enjoy a haunted house at this point, I think. So I can see why you'd think, oh, a book set, 70 years ago, surely it's only like retreading path that I've already read, 50, 100
Yeah.
times. But I really can't think of another book that's, really nailed what Shirley Jackson's like managed to do. And like you can see her influence everywhere for sure. Like Catcher
Oh
in the
yeah.
World is always the one I go back to, but yeah, it's everywhere. But no, for me, no one has ever been able to kind of recreate that, and I don't know, that adds to its magic for me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, that this came up with somebody that I interviewed recently. We were talking about how a lot of modern horror relies upon our own knowledge of the genre, right?
Mm,
Like we've gotten to a point that metafiction has become like so mainstream that like horror, in order for it to be intellectual, sometimes is self-referential in a way that horror of the 50s and 60s could not be because there was no horror to reference or there was no knowledge to be had. Like this was instituting the knowledge that we have. But unlike that, Shirley Jackson is interrogating fear itself with The Haunting of Hill House because she has a main character who is frequently questioning, am I afraid or am I not? And she says, I don't know why I just said that. Am I afraid? Like, and then she'll say to people, I wasn't afraid. But then we hear her internal thoughts and we're like, no, she's afraid. So like it does something really magical in the sense that I feel like it was so ahead of its time and prescient about interrogating the genre itself and what it means to be afraid and where that leaves us, you know?
absolutely, yeah. I think there's so much kind of discourse with it in terms of like mental health and anxiety as well. And, you know, for a book in the 50s, 60s, you know, it's just really kind of interesting to see that and go, like, well, that, you know, really translates to today. But, you know, I don't think you necessarily see it like so well put, and maybe I'm
Yeah.
wrong, but in other
No,
books from that period.
no, I agree. And I think this is about to be a compliment for you, but this is a testament to how well you know me. But like, I
Absolutely.
have, huh? You're saying I have, I went into school to study forensic psychology because it used to bother me without end, knowing if people were insane or not. Like in a very literal sense in the court of law, whenever people would plead insanity, like, we think, I don't know if y'all are familiar with it, but I'm not going to be able to remember his name right now. Shit, it'll come back to me later. But it was the guy, he was a serial killer. I think it was up in New York, and I think he got caught with a traffic ticket. But he said that he killed all of the people that he killed because the next door neighbor's dog was telling him to do it and was like torturing him, and he was like really demented. And I remember hearing that and being like, what the like, especially as like a sheltered Catholic kid, you're like, what the hell? Like that's whenever you begin to wonder if like possession is real, right? And
Sure. Yeah.
so and so you look to science, much like Dr. Montague does in this book, to give you an answer. You want logic and science to know whether or not you were crazy or people can be crazy or like what's the propensity for crazy or unwell, right? And then unfortunately, as you grow up and you enter adulthood, nothing is ever as linear or black and white as that. But, as a young person, I wanted to find reason and logic. And I got a lot of comfort in a diagnosis. I was like, oh, if we can label this and give it a name, we know how to treat it, we know how to, attack this, whatever. But as I've gotten older, the thing that I've realized is that a diagnosis can be wrong. Or
Sure.
you can change and there's comorbidity. You can have more than one ailment or affliction. And I learned that through grad school and I love my DSM-5. It's very fun to reference sometimes. But at the end of the day, what good does that do you? And I took an ethics class that actually, kind of spoke to that. And I feel like in that same way, Shirley Jackson is unpacking what good does it do to say whether somebody's sane or insane. Like she wants to drive you to the point where you're questioning what's real and what's not. But in the end, it's the same outcome. In the end, Nell's doomed, right? And so I think the biggest takeaway that I have from Shirley Jackson and Hill House is that sometimes labeling it as a haunting or sometimes labeling it as schizophrenia, anxiety, depression, whatever, can be helpful. But in the end, if you're not there and you don't take care of the people around you, then it doesn't really make a difference because, love the character work in this book, but Luke and Theo don't do much to help. poor Eleanor once she descends on this backward slide. They, whether it's perceived or not, actual or just perceived, Nell feels like they are out for her and they don't want her anymore and they reject her and shun her. And Dr. Montague's I find he's a little bit more, in the gray area because he's so clinical about it. But in the end, it's the people that mean most to her that reject her and shun her. And like, what's more devastating than that? Like, whether it's real or perceived, that's how she feels. And then she drives into a tree.
Yeah,
So,
as inevitable as like her death kind of feels, like you do just kind of think, man, if the people around her were a bit more,
yeah.
if they had their eyes a bit wider open, and maybe that's Hill House kind of playing its magic on them as well. I don't know, but yeah, I
Well,
think the book says a lot about just helping others, being aware of the people around you as well.
yeah. And like, I think what's so nefarious is like, to get a little bit more academic with it, like I remember when we learned about the Raven and like Edgar Allan Poe. One of the big things in school that we were taught is like fear and isolation leads to madness, and like that was my thesis for my paper on The Shining. I was like, as soon as you
Hmm.
start cutting people off, and they're like paranoid, that's when the real insanity begins because there's no grip on which to hold on to, and that's so true of this. And like, but in the way that Shirley Jackson psychologically isolates Eleanor feels so ahead of its time and like prescient for now. Like how separated are we all politically in this moment, or at least here in I can speak for America. I mean, you're in the UK, but here in
Well,
America,
well,
how isolated do we feel? Like we've never been more, I say it all the time, we've never been more connected through social media and all this other crap, but we've also never felt more disconnected because we're not hearing each other or we're not communicating in ways that allow for healthy conversation it's just a bloodbath all the time. It's just people attacking one another rather than constructive, conversation. Like she basically started that with Hill House. Like she's saying, if you just say to Eleanor, you're too afraid, you're not doing well, you need to go. Shunning is not the answer. Shunning is never, I don't think, the answer. And it's hard to not shun, but,
no, the house is very much kind of the devil on his shoulder, isn't it?
yeah.
It's just very nefarious as, she kind of gets pushed away from, the people that she's met. Like the house really just kind of consumes her, right? Like there's real kind of like groomy element to it, which is just very like, ugh.
Oh yeah, no, no, for real. And they talk about, I think that there's a line too about its hunger and what it wants and all these
Mm.
things, which feels very, very apt. But I think, okay, we're already at like an hour and 15 minutes on this. So to wrap up this conversation, I want to go ahead, we'll go through and I want you to share what you think the most disturbing scene or part of this book is and like what has stuck with you the most from Hill House.
Okay, there's two, but I'm going to say one in case I steal yours.
Okay.
Um, for me, it's when Nell and Theo are walking like on the grounds outside the house, and in I think this is an illusion where it seems beautiful. Like there's the brook, there's like a picnic going on, and then all of a sudden it just cuts to Theo screaming, and she's running, and she's saying, "Do not turn back," and we just never find out what that is, and it's just such like a snapshot of there's something horrific, but you just never know what it is, and I think that really encompasses the book for me because it just leaves it with like imagination is all you have, and so much of the book
Yeah.
is imagination and the dangers of that and what you conjure up with that rather than what's really there. And yeah, there's just something about that. Like, what on earth was it? And I'm
Yeah.
glad we never knew, but yeah, oof.
No, I agree that I'm glad that we never know because whatever you conjure up is so much more terrifying than
Yeah,
whatever she could tell you, and I think that she knew that, obviously, which again, points for Cheryl there.
absolutely.
Um, okay, as far as what jarred me the most, I think it was actually whenever a lot of people point to the hand holding thing, like whose hand was I
Yeah.
holding?
Yes. Yeah.
But like right before that, she she hears her mom and she's like, "Oh, I'm coming, mom." Like she says that Eleanor says out loud, "I'm coming, mom." And then like you're like, "Oh, but her mom's not there." You know that. But it's such a jarring shift of like absolute surety from Eleanor that she's gonna go and help her mom that you know is not there that like frightened it almost like jump scared me a little bit, which I think is interesting to kind of because it's very much like a throwaway line. I don't hear a lot of people talking about it, but it's one of those things that whenever I read it, I was like, oh, here we go. This is when it really begins. Like this is where the scary actually, you know, begins to take hold. And there's another line. I'm gonna try to find it. I don't know that I can in my book because I've highlighted so much crap that has
It's got to be done.
actually that actually like really upset me. But I think oh, I know what it was. So the idea of absolute reality. Um, you know, the book opens up with like you know, the big opening line is like even whatever uh shit, I can't remember it now. They're allowed to dream. The critters are allowed to dream. You know, like
Sure.
even the most basic beings on this earth are allowed to dream. And Hill House as a whole is the place where you are not allowed to dream, it seems like. Like Eleanor reports back that on her first night, that is the best night's sleep that she ever has, and she doesn't know what she dreamt about. Like she talks about like how weird it is that this is the place where she's been most at peace, but the idea and like the idea that she's not allowed to dream is so unsettling because like quite frankly whenever she is thinking of her future she's like, "Oh, I'm going to go home with Theo and we'll live together." And then
Oh,
Theo shuts that down rather abruptly and rudely.
it's
And
painful.
yeah, and Eleanor is just like left kind of like I think of her like at sea without a life raft, right? Like
Mm.
she's not allowed to dream. Like in essence, Theo is saying you're not allowed to dream that. That's not going to happen. Like in so many ways, Shirley Jackson keeps reiterating this idea of Hill House is only absolute reality, and it's frightening, but also is it? And if it is absolute reality, then what does it mean to dream? And when you can't dream, what is that? You know, like it's these layers of interrogation that we never really get an answer on. But the idea of not being able to dream and like what that means both in a literal sense and like in a metaphorical, like you can't aspire, you can't look forward, you can't work towards something else on the whole is so tragic and horrific to me that like chills my blood. Like that's a facet of the human condition that when you cut that off, it's like then how are you of this earth, you know?
Yeah, and Nell's such a dreamer as well. I mean, that whole lead up where she's traveling to the house, it's just, you know, dream after dream. Like, oh, I want my house to have this. You know, the whole have your cup of stars thing, right? That's,
Yeah.
you know, dreaming and aspiring. Like, dreaming for something more is just so like part and parcel of who she is. So yeah, Hill House is just not the place for her. But
No. But well, like that's what Shirley does so great with this book is she gives you exactly what the characters need and then she rips it away horrifically. She gives Eleanor the you know, Eleanor's the one who says the bit about the cup of stars that I love, cried when I read it the first time. But then she's the one to take it away. Like it gets taken away from her. She can't insist on her cup of stars because everything's been ripped away systematically, might I add, with the isolation and the borderline bullying and the, you know, everything else. So I don't know. It's a brutal book. It's beautiful. It's poignant. I can't say enough good. I mean, like I totally get why everybody hails it a classic and it should be. And then you were 100% right in that it was very much the book for me on multiple levels. But yeah, I have plenty more thoughts on Hill House, but we're coming up to like an hour and 30 minutes, so I don't want to make this too long.
yeah, this could be 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours.
I feel like we could have done a deep dive episode by episode on the limited series had we been doing this back in the day when it came out. I feel like we would have made out like
Oh,
incredibly
imagine.
well. We would have done incredibly well for ourselves then, but alas, our time has passed. But anyway, thank you, Charlie, for joining me and doing this incredibly in-depth deep dive on this book that you insisted I read for multiple years and that I only just got around to. As I stated, I am reading We Have Always Lived in the Castle now. I have no idea where it's going. I wish I did because everything just seems so strange. Everybody's so fucking weird. I love it.
Good luck.
Good luck.
And it will remind you of several of the books, which is cool, because then you'll probably go, oh, I need to go reread those. So good
Did
luck for
you
that.
I don't know if this like translates across the pond, but do you know about like In Cold Blood by Truman Capote and like the true crime element of all of that?
I'm not personally familiar.
Okay, so and even I'm not because I haven't read it, but like it's just this like true crime book that focuses on this crime. Basically, I think somebody went in with a shotgun and like decimated this family, and it was like small town, very gritty. I could be getting this wrong. I could be talking out of my ass right now. So everybody, please apologize if I am not getting In Cold Blood correct. But what I think We Have Always Lived in the Castle does so well is like it's oddly interrogated. Like reading it now, it's interrogating our fascination with true crime, with uh the uncle. He is so fixated on what happened that day and like he won't let it go and he's talking about his book and then like everybody being afraid and like how they treat them. It's so I'm gonna have to do another deep dive episode on it, I fear. But we'll
I think
see.
you should.
I'm
It's
reading it with
cathartic.
Yeah, I'm reading it with George and Tiffany at this moment, so that might be another episode. But yeah, this is my, I guess I've officially started my Shirley Jackson journey in the year of our Lord 2025. And I hope that you all are along for the ride because I will not be shutting up about it anytime soon.
No time like the present.
Very, very good point. Well, thank you so much, Charlie. If anybody else wants to talk about Hill House or any of Shirley Jackson's other stuff, because by the time that this goes out, I'll probably have finished We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Let me know. And if you like episodes like this, let me know because there's plenty of backlist stuff that I want to go back and unpack. And I have plenty of friends I feel like that I could tap and say, hey, you want to come talk about this thing that came out however many years ago and that I'm only just getting to now? Um, yeah, we might make this more of a regular thing. But one last time, thank you very much, Charlie. Oh, where can people find you on social media? I think I already mentioned it at the beginning, but just in case if people want to keep up with you.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm bare bones books pretty much everywhere, I think. Instagram, Substack, um, Twitter, kind of. I mean, maybe not Twitter.
Yeah.
Please
No,
say.
I think that we're both there for sports updates only at this point.
Pretty much, yeah. But
Yeah.
just want to say thank you to you, really. I mean, it's been really cathartic for me. I mean, God, whenever I studied this book, maybe like 5 years ago, it's during COVID. I've never actually had a chance to sit down and talk to someone about it really for like an hour or two. It's just kind of been me and my podcasts and like my thoughts in my head. So, it's been really nice.
No, this is actually, we need to start like a Shirley Jackson support group where we have group therapy once every 2 weeks and we air all of our grievances and our thoughts about the books that have traumatized us from her.
Absolutely. I'm in.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Charlie. And until next time. Shirley Jackson giveth, Shirley Jackson take awayeth. That's a terrible pun or joke or saying, but it's true. Listening back to this episode to edit it, I could not get over how perfectly set up The Haunting of Hill House is as a novel. It is truly probably one of the most perfect books that I've ever read in terms of synchronicity and perfect setups for shadowing, foreboding moods, you name it. Shirley Jackson has done it with this novel. There's a few things I want to touch on that I kind of elaborated on in this chat that I want to expand upon here. First and foremost, huge thank you to my good friend Charlie. He has been a huge supporter of the podcast and a great friend for these 2 years now, and I'm thrilled that I finally had a chance to get him on the show. And of course, for Hill House is, a very special occasion. And then second of all, I had the stunning realization when I listened back to this that when we see the scene with Eleanor uh, being told about the writing on the wall saying, Eleanor, come home, it's the literal writing on the wall, like the saying. And, I had to Google it to see if that's where the saying came from about, kind of predicting the future, its inevitability. But unfortunately, it's biblical and not because of Shirley Jackson. Big boo there, but, whatever. It's fine. But yeah, the biggest takeaway that I have, I think, whenever I'm thinking about The Haunting of Hill House is just how hopeless it all feels. And I don't know that I've found a book that has encapsulated that feeling of hopelessness quite like Shirley Jackson has. In the way that she serves up to her characters exactly what they want, exactly what they need, and then kind of brutally takes it away from them without any violence or goriness or, it's never over the top. It's always exactly what it needs to be to get the job done, which is really quite chilling when you think about it. Beyond that, whenever you think about it in comparison to Mike Flanagan's Haunting of Hill House, he takes that very notion and kind of twists it on its head and gives it a more hopeful ending, saying that, we'll never really walk alone in the end and that we need to take care of each other. Both stories kind of leave us with that feeling like we need to look out for each other a little bit more. And I want to circle back to my rant that I had about, diagnoses and all these things. Diagnoses are wonderful things whenever it comes to mental health, mental illness, treating conditions of emotional disorders, whatever you want to call them. It's really important to get a diagnosis sometimes for medication purposes, for insurance purposes, for all kinds of purposes. But also, at the end of the day, I think that it's really important that we're around for our fellow man and that you can diagnose something to death and you can put it in its proper box. And if you still aren't treating that thing in a way that is serious and thoughtful and with humanity, then I don't know that the label does a lot of good. And it's just something that this book has made me really, really think about in terms of Eleanor's condition, her view of sanity versus insanity, and where that leaves her at the end of the day when she's surrounded by these people who, seemingly are found family, but at the end, she's wondering why they're letting her do what she's doing. So, just some food for thought about those things, and it's just such an incredible. Again, I could talk about this book for forever, and I'm going to try to not let this outro ramble on for too long. Um, but yeah, just more thoughts that were brought on by listening to this episode, editing it back. I really am a fan of doing something like this. It's definitely more talking for me, and I'm not sure how you all feel about that. Um, but it's a really good time to get to unpack books in this way, and I'm very thankful to have a community and friends who are willing to do it with me. So yeah, there might be more of this in the future. We'll see. Well, thank you all for listening for this long. It's a long one. I think it's a good one, but it's a long one. And I'll be back to my regular scheduled program on Tuesday with my episode with Ali Malanyiko on her novel, Broken Dolls. Equally chilling, but for different reasons.